Hello everybody, welcome back to my channel. This is going to be a quick video on how to get started with the AWS Java SDK. The AWS services, obviously they're available in the console, which we might be used to seeing by now, which is very handy to browse, very graphical, all that kind of stuff. When it comes to designing systems to perform the really kind of the nitty-gritty stuff, you're probably going to want to be invoking these services via an SDK like the Java SDK. So the SDK is a Java library that Amazon provide, which you can then use in your own project, run in your own servers, which in the back end will be invoking services from AWS. So I'm just going to kind of walk you through. I've put together a little kind of hello world project, which is available in Github. I'll share the link down below, and I'll walk you through that project. Hopefully you'll find it very, very straightforward to set up. Once you set up a hello world example in any technology, almost from there, the sky's the limit. You can kind of build on it from there. So I'm going to do an SDK example, particularly sort of focused on S3. S3 is obviously one of many Amazon services here, many of which you can invoke via the Java API. S3 is the scalable storage in the cloud, so that's basically your service for uploading and storing files in the cloud, essentially. So it's a very simple use case. Java will create pull in a file locally, publish it, upload it to an S3 bucket over the internet via the Amazon Web Services, and then we'll see that the application we've written will has actually copy that file there. So very simple example, but hopefully I'll take you through step by step every single little step of the way so you can follow. All the resources will be linked down below, and so let's get started. Alright, so this is the console. First thing we're going to do is create a user that can perform this operation. So I'm going to create a brand new user so you see all the steps. These are my users from the previous examples, so I'm going to do a new one. So I'm going to do create new. I'm going to try and go a bit quickly here, so create new to example 2. Okay, create. So the next thing, you might have seen this before in IAM. When you create a new user, it invites you to show or download the credentials. The credentials, I'm showing them here. Don't get too excited. I'm going to delete these credentials after the example. But these are essentially the public key and private key that your new user will be using if you want to use that user to sign external requests that are invoking Amazon services. So, for example, when you log into the console here, you say, okay, this is the account that I want to log into. This is my username. This is my password. If you've got a Java application that's invoking a service from a line of code, that you don't actually specify username, a password, an account number. Instead, what you say is in the behind the scenes, the SDK or the code that's running in your application will sign that request with your secret access key, and that will be checked on the Amazon side to see whether, first of all, which account it applies to, which user within that account that applies to, and then what permissions, or whether that user has permission to do what the external application is actually requesting. So we'll see all this in a second. So the first thing is, it says download credentials. So the idea is, when you create the user, you download the credentials, and basically make a note of them, store them in your application. What the key point is that once you download them once, you can't download them again, right? So I'm just going to copy these for now, and I'm going to basically go back to my desktop, and I'm just going to go to this file here. We'll come back to this in a second. I'm just going to make a note of these credentials here. Right? So that's that. Just double check those are correct. That was Q and E. Yeah, that looks good. So basically, I've downloaded the credentials for my new user, right? And these credentials will be used by an application, as you'll see in a minute, to invoke services on that user's behalf, right? And keep these credentials, especially the secret access key, very, very secret, right? Because if somebody else gets that secret access key, they can then write their own applications using your user, using your account, spinning up EC2 instances, storing huge files in S3, and you could end up paying a lot of money, right? So going back to, so we've created our credentials, we've downloaded them. So we're going to close that like this. So once you've downloaded the credentials once, you can't get them back, so you need to keep them safe. You can regenerate them anytime by logging back into the console, generating completely new credentials. Then those new credentials need to be imported back into your applications that are using them. Okay, so we have our YouTube example 2 user. At the moment, this user has no permissions to do anything whatsoever, right? So by default, Amazon, when you create new users, gives 0 permission. That's the sort of the basic skeleton of its trust policy. By default, users have nothing in terms of permission. So because this is like an S3 example, we could do a DynamoDB example. I'm going to do an S3 one because we haven't really covered S3 in any of these videos. Because of that, I'm going to attach a policy to this user, and for now, just for simplicity, I'm going to give it, I'm going to search for S3 in the, so these are the Amazon managed policies, and I'm going to give it full access to S3, right? And if we just refresh our memory on the policy syntax, this is a policy that's created and managed by Amazon. If we show what the policy is, it says this policy has the effect to allow actions of any type within the S3 action space, so any S3 service, on any resource, right? That's the wildcard there. So it's basically full permissions within S3, right? So we've now attached that policy to our YouTube example 2 user, which means that when we invoke a service from an external application using that user credentials, i.e. their public private key, they will have that application will have access to perform full operations on S3, right? So that's really that. Just quickly going to S3, just a quick introduction into S3. S3 is Amazon's scalable storage in the cloud. So in a nutshell, I'm going to do the next video is going to be a continuation of this. It's going to be an exploration of how you enforce things like server-side encryption and stuff in S3. But in a nutshell, S3 you can think of S3 as a collection of buckets within your account, and in those buckets you just drop objects, and those objects are typically files. So and you can put as many as you want. They'll just charge you for as much usage as you incur. So you can create new buckets. A bucket that you can think of it conceptually like an infinitely sized folder. You can have one bucket per account, or you can have, I think, up to 100 buckets per account. At the moment, I only have one bucket here from a previous run. I'm not going to go into detail what that is at the moment, but we're actually going to delete that as part of the Java example. So just to give you an overview, so that's S3 on the console side. Within my account, I have one bucket set up. Okay, so we've got our user. We've shown you S3. The next step is to actually connect to Amazon through Java, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to basically start a completely new Java project from scratch, right? Sorry, not in Safari, in IntelliJ. So we're going to go. So by the way, so the first thing you need. So this example, as I said, I've created a sample project for you to use. I'll link it down below. All you need is Java installed and an IDE like Eclipse or IntelliJ. I'm assuming that if you're interested in a Java SDK, then you know something about Java already. If you don't, it's going to be problematic. So I'm going to do new project from version control, and I'm going to go to GitHub. And this is the URL. I'll link it down below of my AWS Java Hello World example, right? And I'm going to call this example 4 this project. So you basically give your project a name. It can be anything. Then you just clone that. I clone this, which is basically pulling out if you're familiar with Git, it's cloning whatever is on my GitHub in that project onto my local system. Okay, so that's that. I have to do a couple of things up here. So I have to basically enable Git source control up here by adding root, and I need to enable auto import up here of maven dependencies. So just follow this example. If you don't know what they mean, just do what I did. Okay, so the beauty of this project and the beauty of any Hello World project is that it should work out of the box very quickly and enable you to build on top of it very easily and basically give you all the plumbing you need, right? So then you can work on it from there. So how does this project know that it's an AWS project? Where does the plumbing come from? How does it connect to AWS? Well, if you're familiar with Maven, I hope, again, slight prerequisite of this, otherwise it's going to be a bit difficult to understand, but it'll still work for you. You can just ignore this part. So all we're doing here is basically we're declaring a dependency on the AWS Java SDK Maven modules. So this project is pulling those dependencies down, all the libraries that we need to actually connect to AWS in the back end. I have a couple of other key files. I have a couple of I've just got a sample text file that I'm going to be uploading into the cloud. That's in my resources folder. I have a policy which I'm going to be talking about in the next video. So just in case you're wondering what those are, the main nuts and bolts of this particular example are in the S3 Java SDK example. Okay, so what we're going to do, we're going to basically run through this first method here, which basically is an end-to-end example of deleting all the existing buckets in the account that your credentials represent, creating a new bucket, and uploading a file into that bucket. Right, it's a very, very simple use case, but I just wanted to literally show you, how to basically get the plumbing right. Give you a project you can work with yourself. You should be able to do exactly the same thing. If you have any trouble, give me a question down below, and I'll hopefully help you out. So what I do need to do, because this is a new project, I'm going to need to download those credentials again, right? Which is going to be an interesting. It'll be sort of hopefully hammer the point home. So we're going to go back to here, and we're going to go back to IAM console, and we're going to go to IAM Identity Access Management, and we're going to go to the user we created, and we're going to go to YouTube example 2, that was our user, and we're going to go to security credentials, and we're going to basically, because I remember I said that you can only download these once. Now because I copied those credentials into a previous project down here, I'm just going to regenerate these, right? So I'm going to delete this one, so nobody can ever use it again. And then I'm just going to do it all again. So create access key, okay? Then I'm going to show the credentials. So I can either download them like I did before, or I can just copy them off the screen here. In this case, I'm just going to copy them off the screen, right? So I'm going to go here, I'm going to copy the access key ID, I'm going to go into my credentials Java class, and I'm going to copy the access key ID into here. So by the way, this is very, in security-wise, this is very irresponsible, but I'm going to delete the keys afterwards. So don't get too excited if you want to make me bankrupt or anything. Then I'm going to copy if I can just grab that properly, going to copy the private key, and I'm going to dump that in here. Yeah, that should work. So those are my credentials there, right? And I store so I'm not going to check these into the Git repository, but this is where the key point is that when you check this project out, okay, and play around, this credentials file, this is where you're going to place the credentials from your Amazon user, right? So that's the key thing, right? So I'm going to close that. It's going to warn me, so you haven't downloaded the security credentials. Once you close the window, you can't get them back, which is fine because we've copied them into the Java class. Sorry, I know I'm sort of repeating myself a bit here, but I want to make it 100% clear. All right, so that's the credentials file, just a very simple Java class that gives the access key and secret access key. Bucket utils is another Java class which has some utility methods that I'm just building up over time. I'll keep updating this, by the way, so if you're interested in kind of keeping an eye on the project and you want to take updates, then I'll keep sort of checking useful stuff into here. But for the moment, the only utility method is to delete a given bucket. So the most interesting, or the main class that we're going to actually go through, is the Java SDK example, right? So basically, I'm going to do two parts of this video. One is just getting the SDK up and running, showing you everything about the credentials, downloading them, all that kind of stuff, and running an end-to-end example. The second part, I'm going to just show you something quite useful about the server-side encryption for S3 and how you can create a bucket using the SDK. So without using the UI at all, create a bucket and apply a bucket policy to that bucket that enforces users to specify server-side encryption when they upload files into that bucket. So don't worry too much about that. If that's something you're interested in, then see the next video. Okay, so in a nutshell, so hopefully you're a bit familiar with Java, and I'm going to debug through this. If you're not familiar with Java, then it's probably not really the video for you, but you know, by all means go away and look at some introductory Java videos on Treehouse or whatever. I'm going to go back to S3, and I'm just going to show that, so right now in my account, right, I have one bucket, right? Now the key point I want to illustrate here is that this method I'm going to call here is this one here, and all I'm doing here, right, is I'm creating a AWS credentials object, and I'm specifying my access key ID and secret access key. So nowhere here do I specify username and password and the account number that I'm actually logging into. It's all encapsulated within those credentials, right? So there's nothing outside here that's telling this application, okay, connect to my account. It could be connecting to any account, just the fact that these credentials here encapsulate all the information that it needs to know. Right, that's a very key point. So I'm just going to actually just debug through this. I know it's gone a bit small here, but I'm trying to fit everything on one screen. So if I go up here and I try and debug this, hopefully it'll work. Yeah, I'll stick a breakpoint there. Just wait for it to start. So the JVM's up and running. Okay, so we've hit the first breakpoint, which is good. So we're just going to step inside. So F7. So here what we're doing is we're setting up our credentials object, right? So, and we're passing in the credentials that we just downloaded. Then we just pass those into an S3 client object. S3 client object is the object through which we're actually going to invoke all our services, right? So that's it, and actually I find that it's really useful to actually use these SDKs to browse the different services that you can use, right? Because you can actually see when you're actually in development mode, right? You can see from autocomplete, you can see all the different services available, like the different methods that can invoke. Sometimes that's actually easier to see than playing around with the console, right? So basically, this client is our kind of proxy to access all of those S3 services, right? Now the first one we're going to invoke is the list buckets, right? So you can see S3 client.list buckets here. We're looping through them. We're going to delete all the buckets that are there. The reason is because I don't want to basically run this example 10 times and create 10 different buckets, because Amazon will start to charge you. Well, it starts charging you from day one or from the first bucket, but you don't want holding hundreds of buckets because you want to keep an eye on the resources that you're using. So basically, if I step inside there, or actually I've stepped over that, but that's fine. So inside here, I've said, right, delete this bucket, right? So I'm going to delete this bucket here, and so if you see on the left hand side, there's the existing bucket. I'm going to go, and it's running, and it's now finished. There was only one bucket there. If I go over to the left hand side now, I'll just quickly make that bigger, right? And if I refresh this, you'll see that, so right now we have one bucket, but if I refresh the screen, then this bucket will have disappeared, right? So we have no buckets in my account now. This is just basically the splash page that says, okay, well, you've got no buckets in your account, so do you want to create one? Well, okay, yeah, maybe I do, maybe I don't. At the moment, you know, I'm trying to wean myself off the GUI, so I'm just going to leave it as it is for the time being. So what we're going to do now is we're going to, so it's a very simple example. We're just going to create a new bucket. We're going to give it a name, so I've just given it silly name with the current system time. And here again, so we're calling S3 client.create bucket, right? So S3 client, remember, is that proxy to all of the services to do with S3. So we're going to call create bucket. Now, so what we're doing here, remember, is this S3 client knows about the credentials, so it knows about what account this is, what user, and all that kind of stuff. And in the background, it's permissioning. It's determining, whether that user has permission to do it. So we know we gave our user full S3 access. So if we go down here and do this, then right now we should see we've created a new bucket, right? So if we go back to our screen on the left, and here we've got our new bucket, right? At the moment, we haven't put anything in it. It's going to be empty, right? So it says this bucket is empty. That's perfectly fine. Okay. So now the last thing we're going to do is we're going to create a file. Okay. So I have a file, as I showed you, sometext.txt, which just says some nonsense in there, right? So I've created that file. I'm now pulling that file from the project class path and creating a Java file from it. Okay, so then and then the next thing I do is I create a put object request, which tells the SDK which bucket you want to put the object inside, so which bucket you want to upload the file into, and then the full file name of the object that you want to put in the store. Now S3, I know this is supposed to be about SDK, but S3 is basically a key value store, and what that means is that when you upload an object into S3, you specify a key and a value. The key is basically the file name or the file path, right? And the value is the object itself, the file, the actual file, right? So when you upload, so the first parameter here is the actual bucket name. The second parameter is basically, I've just specified the string unencrypted plus file name, which was sometext.txt, plus the current system timestamp. So that's the full file name. It's unencrypted / sometext.txt dot current system timestamp, and then the last parameter is the object that you want to upload, as in the actual file that you want to put there, right? Because it's a Java API, we need to pass a Java object into the method. Okay, so once we do that, we create the request, and then we just simply again through that S3 client we put object with that request, right? So if I just step through here, and just to show, we have encrypted this object. So the next video, as I mentioned, we're going to show how you specify to Amazon that I want you to encrypt this data at your end, completely transparently to me, so that anybody who somehow manages to hack the S3 bucket cannot actually read anything that's in there, right? So what we've done here is we've uploaded a file. So if we look here, we can see exactly what's happened there, right? So, by the way, if all you wanted to do at this point is basically see an end-to-end example of setting up an SDK project, seeing how you set it up, how you download user credentials, feel free to drop off at this point. It's probably this is more kind of S3 specific, but if you're interested in carrying on the S3 side of things, then please feel free. So if I look inside my new bucket, now we see there's a folder here called unencrypted, and inside there there's a file or an object which is called sometext.txt.systemTimestamp. Now I want to say something quickly about folders, just in case you don't watch the next video, because I'll say it again in the next one. In S3 there is really no concept of actual physical folders. Folders are something that they're there really for your convenience, and just so you can kind of browse around. You can sort of segregate different file paths within your file name. And what I mean by that is, when I uploaded this file, right, I said that the file name was /encrypted /sometext.txt.this, right? What Amazon S3 does is on the fly. It basically when it presents you the S3 bucket, it presents a kind of pseudo folder structure, as if that folder exists, right? So unencrypted, as if that exists, but really behind the scenes it's all basically one. It's just a key which is /unencrypted /sometext.txt blah 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 blah, and then the object is the actual file context. So so sometimes that throws people. In S3 there are no physical folders. It's just they're kind of logical folders, and you can create as many subpaths as you want, and then in the console you can browse each one of these subpath nodes as if they're an actual directory. But that's by the by. So in a nutshell, Just hit that. So now the application's finished. That is the end-to-end process. Now, the last thing I want to do, just on the subject of this video, is just to sort of hammer home the relationship between the permissions. So if I go back, and if I go back to my IAM, where's my and what I'm going to do is I'm just going to show you what happens when we remove that user permission, right? So I'm going to go back to my user, okay? I'm not going to do anything with the access keys, right? They're the same. But what I am going to do, I'm going to change their permissions. And instead of full access, so I'm going to detach full access for S3, and I'm going to attach S3 read-only access, right? So now, if I go back to my application, and I'm in my credentials, so these credentials that I've been using, which are associated with my YouTube example 2 user, these credentials now will not enable me to perform read-write operations on S3, right? Because the underlying user in that account has now been updated to a read-only user. So if we just quickly demonstrate that, and then we'll wrap it up for this video, and then we'll go on to the next one. So so if we debug this one again, and it's basically it's going to fail at the first hurdle where we try and delete the bucket, right? So if remember this one here, the first thing it does is it goes in here, and so list bucket you'll find it can do, right? Because I've given it read only. So read only can list the buckets, and that's what it's done here, right? So we've managed to list the buckets, but when we try and delete that bucket, right? Oops. Pardon me. When we try and delete that bucket, I'm just going to resume. My apologies. It's a bit. I was going to see the exception. So down here, we see the exception, and we see access denied. What it says is that these credentials do not have permission to perform that delete operation on S3. So that's really that. As I said, I'll link the project down below so you can play around, you can run this example. It should work out of the box without anything you need to do whatsoever. All you need to do is have your own account, download your credentials and import them in there, and then you should be up and running. So thank you very much for watching. I know it's been a bit of a long video, but hopefully it was useful. Any questions, give me a shout, and I'll see you in the next video. Thank you. Bye.